Welcome to Faster Together, the LinkedIn Live series of the Women Business Collaborative. I'm Gwen Young, the Chief Operating Officer of the WBC. And today we are joined by Maria Colic-Couturier and Gemma Toner to talk about pay parity and workplace equity. The WBC is an unprecedented alliance of over 70 women business organizations and hundreds of business leaders, building a movement to achieve equal position, pay, and power for all women in business. Through collaboration, advocacy, action, and accountability, we are mobilizing thousands to create momentum and accelerate the pace of change. We live our commitment to DEI, and members of our leadership, a diverse board of directors, and advisories and leaders council include more than 34% people of color. Please check the chat for our 9 action initiatives through which we aim to accelerate change, and join our movement at wbccollaborative.org. Each week in this series, we offer different ways to advocate change and accelerate impact by presenting data, research, and best practices, by lifting up the power of women's voices for change, and by showing the importance of cross-generational collaboration and the allyship of men in the movement. So today, let's talk about workplace equity, pay parity, transparency, innovation, and how we're actually accelerating change. So we have with us Gemma Toner of Tone Networks and Maria Colic-Couturier. I will get your name wrong, Maria, I'm sorry, from Syndio.
Okay.
Let's talk about this. Let's start with the pay parity gap, which has steadily decreased, but the rate at which pay equity will achieve and still remains at 2,111, over 100 years to get there. Maria, let's talk a bit about what you're doing at Syndio's and Syndio's tools for workplace equity. And can you give us an overview of what you're doing to bridge the gap?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me today. And it's just such a delight to be here with Gemma, who I had the opportunity to meet in person in New York a couple of months ago. So here's the deal. We all know that we are in a very volatile moment in terms of the economy. And so I get a lot of questions around workplace equity. And is this a nice to have or a must have? And so what we do at Syndio is we have a workplace equity platform. And our imperative is to help companies embed this into the core of how they do business. And there's a couple of reasons why that's so critical. So when we think about workplace equity, a lot of times people don't know what that means. So to us, and the way that we define it is it's pay equity plus opportunity equity. And those two things together are the formula for true workplace equity. So pay equity is equal pay for equal work. So ensuring that people doing similar jobs are not paid unfairly or that there are pay disparities because of something like gender, race, ethnicity. We have software that innovates that process and moves it from a very backward-looking one and done audit that you do through a law firm that's very expensive, costly, and takes a lot of time to something that is now using software. So the benefit of that is you still get to understand to the penny how much to pay people in order to make it right. But also what you get that you don't get in the backwards-looking law audit are the underlying insights to which behaviors and practices are driving those disparities in the first place. You can get to that root cause and make sure that you get ahead of it and start to prevent those disparities from popping up again. Because a lot of times what we hear companies say is, I went through this process, I did this audit, and then a year later I had the same issues in the same departments. Well, that's a reflection of not getting to the root cause. And then number 2, starting pay is the biggest factor in any pay equity analysis. So if you're not looking at how you're paying people that are coming into your company in line with your people that already work there, you're going to have problems. So that's the first part of what we do. The second part is opportunity equity. And this has the biggest impact on what we talk about as the median pay gap. So as you noted, the median pay gap, we're making glacial pace toward closing it. And actually we backslid quite a bit during the pandemic with women dropping out of the workforce and coming back at a more slower rate. And the median pay gap is really not about pay at all. It's about opportunity. It's about movement. It's about how can we give equitable opportunities in our company to improve that representation as you move from the lower, more junior paying roles up into the senior most levels of the company. How do you make sure there's equitable opportunity and impact across the levers in which we as leaders have control? So you can't just hire your way there. You've got to hire, retain, promote, and move your way there. So those two things are what we solve in our workplace equity platform using technology.
I love that. And that's a perfect lead into Gemma and Tone Network and the work you've been doing to improve the conditions organizations, of individuals, and get us closer. Can you talk a bit about maybe that
Yeah.
opportunity, what you're doing at Tone
I'd
Networks?
love to, because it's so great that we're both on this LinkedIn Live together today, because we do really work so well together in that our goal at Tone Networks is to get women access to mentoring and coaching earlier in their careers in a form factor that women can actually use. When you ask women in the workplace, what is it that stands in the way of your personal and professional development? Well, it's time, it's access, it's confidence, and it's permission. And so we've developed a software, content, and data platform that actually delivers women what they're interested in, what they need in that just-in-time moment. Because again, when you ask working women, and I know all of us can relate to this, where are they on their to-do list? Oftentimes we're all at the bottom, and there's all of these other job-related responsibilities and life-related responsibilities that we're taking care of first. And so our goal is to get women this content, this knowledge in a form factor that makes it very easy for them to use. And our enterprise solution works with companies that are looking to do basically the next step of what Maria's product does, right? In that, okay, we are here to help you shore up that gender pipeline and to get women in early to mid stage, to retain them, to grow them, and then move them along so that your company can make that announcement that you have gender equity, not just in numbers, but at all levels in the organization, right? And so that's really what we do. And we also allow women, as we know, need to see success. And we allow companies through our platform to actually showcase their internal role models, because we all need to see, yes, it can be done. And there are people that look like me, that are working moms, that are single moms, that are LGBTQ. We need to be able to showcase those people within their companies so that they see how they can succeed in their company, not just outside of their company. So that's what we do.
Love it. So we've got both kind of, it's that opportunity and that pay. As you both are looking at some of these companies or some of these organizations that you're working with, what are some of the best practices? Like, what are you seeing? What are the best practices? Maybe what's innovative, what's something, recently that a company is doing that would really help move the needle in closing this work?
Yeah, I would say, oh, sorry, go ahead, Gemma.
There you go. No, you go first. It's fine. Go.
So actually the place I met Gemma was, we've been conducting roundtables around the country that are talking about this acceleration in pay transparency legislation. So the fact that now New York City, New York State, Colorado, Oregon, Washington, California are requiring companies, new job postings have to include the range of the new job posting. And so a lot of leaders are very concerned about the communication strategy around that. So how do I first have confidence in my ranges, that they're accurate? Number two, if my ranges are off and I haven't been doing ongoing pay equity analyses, for example, how do I communicate to my existing employees where they are in the range if that isn't something that I've been doing? And then make sure that communication strategy is streamlined so that my people managers can answer questions from their folks who come and say, hey, I noticed you just posted this role that's similar to what I do, but I'm way at the bottom of the range. Why is that? And if those people managers are not prepared, it's going to create a big sandstorm of surface area for not only the people managers, but leadership and the employees themselves. So one of the best practices that we've been talking about, and we have a couple of customers doing this very well, is how do you figure out how to take your pay equity analyses, if you're doing them in an ongoing way, and translate that into what your ranges are for new roles, taking into account your existing pay equity. So again, you take that competitive market range side by side with what we call your equitable range, which is what folks in your company are currently making based on why it is you pay what you pay, whether that's experience or skills or time and role or geolocation, whatever those things are. So first, it's all about having confidence in those ranges, that you balance them between market pay and equitable pay so that you feel really good when you do have to go post them. And the second best practice that we're seeing are companies that are getting really active in training their people managers. So there's a couple of companies specifically that come to mind. The first is Nordstrom. They've done an incredible job of actually doing role playing with their people managers on, here are some of the questions we think you're going to get asked. Why am I at the bottom of the range? Everyone expects to be at the top of the range. Here are some of the answers you can give based on the skills and experience as to why we pay what we pay, because we're really confident in our methodology. Another one of our customers is doing something similar, but they're doing video chalk talks where they're actually walking through, here's our pay philosophy, and here's some of the FAQs we expect from your people when they see these ranges, and here's how to answer them. So I think as we continue to see this push toward transparency, that communication strategy, thinking through not only how you're going to communicate from the C-suite, but also how are you going to prepare your people managers for just the litany of questions they'll be asked by their people, is really critical right now. Gemma, sorry, I know you.
Yeah, no worries. So again, it just sort of, we pair so well, Maria, in that, what we're seeing from a best practices is, companies that we work with, I'll use Comcast as an example, are looking for new innovative ways to authentically engage with their female employees. Once you get the pay equity in line, to retain employees, there are other components that need to be addressed. That sense of, I feel like I belong, I feel like I can see myself, all of those metrics that come back in those employee NPS studies. And so what we see is companies use our product really dependent on their company culture. And what I can say is that from a Comcast perspective, they have their chief diversity officer highly engaged with these women who, a few years ago didn't know who she was and didn't necessarily have a relationship with her. So we're helping them build with our content and our platform an internal community within Comcast so they can actually see those women. And she's encouraging them through our platform to take time for themselves, to actually invest in themselves. Because at the end of the day, yes, we need pay parity, and there's a lot of other things we need to level the playing field, but we also need that work-life balance, and we also need that confidence bolstered so that we can advocate for ourselves better, and then we can negotiate for ourselves better. Because when it comes to pay parity, pay equity, yes, there's a range, but are you in the range, and are you within that, in the right part of that range? And how do you advocate? And so that's what our experts and coaches really help get employees ready for and prepared for.
And that's actually a good segue. I want to switch a little bit. We're talking about sort of like what the companies can do and what you're doing with the companies. And you guys have talked about how you've been at roundtables together and you kind of pair well and meet well. What can women do together within a company or sort of across to help kind of support each other? This is sort of the premise of the WBC is women and men. But how can women help each other? How can we work on building up that, whether that's that negotiation, that role modeling, or whether that's like, here's where we need to be, because that to change that company culture, but to help promote themselves.
Yeah, Gemma, you take this one first, because this is what you do.
I can say we're, first of all, you need to find them, right? I mean, sometimes I think many of us can admit to, you're so busy getting the job done that networking is not necessarily first on our list, and internal networking, certainly not, right? It's usually more of a focus on external networking. And so it's really finding like-minded women within your organization that you can actually begin to get to know, and then you can have that role modeling discussion. You can have that, let me run this by you. You can have that place where if you're, you feel like you need to melt down, you know where to go. And I think the biggest challenge is sometimes, we go to the usual suspects, which usually have some level of proximity. And, back in the day when we all were 100%, in the office, proximity, well, at least you had those usual suspects. Well, today, in a hybrid world, we really do need to build those virtual relationships with people that are of like minds. And so what we find is when you participate in Tone and with Tone and as part of the community, you have self-identified as a woman who wants to support other women, who wants to support everyone in the workplace that is potentially underserved and overlooked. And so you kind of stepped forward and said, I'm a part of this. So you kind of find your people pretty quickly.
Yeah, so I think those are all really great sound pieces of advice. I think the only things I would add are that employees continue to have a great amount of power right now. I mean, Mary Barra from General Motors sort of famously said several months ago, the war for talent is over and the talent has won. And I think regardless of volatility in the economic market, we still see really strong, low numbers on the unemployment side, and that doesn't appear to be changing anytime soon. So I think some of the questions that we see to be sort of more and more heard in terms of employees actually asking for this type of transparency are things like, do we run a pay equity analysis? How often? Can you share a summary of results? Why not? Are we planning to share or disclose even our median pay gap number at a high level? Why do we pay what we pay? What's our pay range for this role? Are we going to post that publicly? Where am I in that range? Just those questions, I think I rattled off 10 there. Your company should be able to answer those questions for you. And not only should they be able to answer those questions for you, there is legislation that is accelerating very quickly that's going to ultimately force companies to answer those questions, whether it's pay transparency legislation or what we saw with the median pay gap bill that passed the California State Senate 2 weeks ago. I mean, that would actually require public disclosure of the pay report, which is W-2 earnings per employee broken down by EEO1 category and by gender, race, and ethnicity. So the trends are headed that way, and companies that sort of see this tidal wave of transparency coming and decide to just dive right into it. And a lot of times the reason that they're doing that is because they're being pushed by their own people to do so. And they're starting to understand that in doing it more voluntarily ahead of sort of the forced hand of legislation and compliance, they're getting in return employee trust. And that's a big negotiating factor right now, is if you give me transparency when you're not forced to yet, I will pay back in return with my trust.
And just to jump on that too, I mean, what we're seeing, and companies that are working with us have been loud and proud of their DEI metrics and their DEI goals. So again, back to that transparency, and they want to do the right thing for all the reasons, Maria, that you just said, but they also want to do it in a demonstrable, measurable way. So it's the difference between sort of talking the talk and genuinely walking the walk, and recognizing that inclusion doesn't mean the same, and that inclusion means different, and that different groups have different requirements and needs when it comes to personal and professional development. And they are loud and proud about that. And what I would also say is that companies that are transparent voluntarily are also being transparent about the KPIs that they're establishing for all leaders in the company. And if you really want to see numbers move, put it into a KPI. And what we're also seeing is that now we're becoming part of what companies are reporting to their investors, because there's the employee expectation, but there's also another expectation, which our investors are expecting this type of behavior, and CEOs are going to be and will be held accountable.
So it sounds like, yeah, it was funny. I was just about to say transparency and accountability, right, is the key. And the accountability is broadening, if you will, and shifting, as we both talked about, from sort of not just the investors, but to the employees themselves, and then communities, this whole kind of companies of purpose movement that's going on as well. What's one piece of advice you want to leave the audience with, whether that's the advice for the companies, continue to be transparent, whether that's advice for the women and men, continue to make that cultural change. Maria, I'll start with you. What's the one piece of advice you want to leave the audience with today?
Yeah, because the audience for WBC are leaders. I mean, you are leaders in your organizations, and you are mentoring and coaching the next generation of leaders, the next level of leaders. I would say in this period where we're headed into tremendous economic volatility and we're not sure what's coming next, we need to keep top of mind that economic uncertainty, those changes and those impacts exacerbate the differences for people that are already disproportionately impacted. So people that come from historically underrepresented groups. So we need to ask ourselves in this moment, do we want to be a leader who is remembered in a time of crisis or volatility that I let fairness take a back seat? In a time of crisis, I decided that the value I place on my most important asset, my people, was going to get slid to the back burner. And I think it's really important to remember that as we enter this time, and maybe we have to do a layoff, maybe we have to contract, maybe we have to freeze or pause hiring for a bit, your people are watching. Your high caliber, most talented people, the people you most want to keep so you can emerge from this time and continue to grow as the economy recovers, which it will. They are watching every single thing that you do, and they are remembering and banking it as part of the legacy of how they will remember you as a leader, and whether they will want to continue to work for you, and how hard they will work for you, the way that you behave and the way that you treat your people in a time of crisis. So that would kind of be my piece of advice. Is it's almost like parenting. Like when we think about parenting, there's always someone watching how we parent. And in the end, it's your kid. It's not the other parents on the playground. Your kid is watching how you parent them. And it's the same thing with our employees. We think about like, gosh, I don't want to be the target of an adverse impact claim or a pay equity class action, or, these other things, a proxy statement where I have to disclose a bunch of stuff. But at the end of the day, none of that matters. I mean, it matters, but what really matters is the fact that all of your people are watching how you behave and how you treat the folks that may have to leave the company. And so just remember that as you make tough decisions.
And I would say, just to again kind of complement that, is truly there's never been a better time than in with all of this uncertainty to truly challenge the status quo, to look at every line item and every behavior and say, wait, has this really worked? Is this something that we've always done because we've always done? Because clearly what has been done has gotten us to where we are today. And in this uncertainty, and with this focus and this opportunity for gender equity, we need to be laser focused on challenging what has been done and look at and say, how do we do it different? How do we do it more effectively? How do we do it using different types of approaches? And I think it's a fabulous time to be brave and challenge some of those holy grails that you never thought could be challenged, because now is the time we have to solve different.
It's perfect. Because thank you, both of you. Thank you for your challenge, your innovation, your laser sharp focus, and for you for being brave and working together. And that's all we have time for today. But thank you. We invite you to WBCollaborative.org to learn more about our initiatives, which are to increase women in the C-suite and boardroom, to address the underrepresentation of women across industries, and to advance a pipeline of women leaders that will bring gender and pay parity, diversity, equity, inclusion to the business landscape. So join us next Thursday, June 23rd, with Britt and Rita Mitchell to talk about their book, Owning Your Phenomenal Self, and all about living authentically, being the best version of yourself. And I think with Marie and Gemma's call to be brave with that best version of yourself. And let's be accountable to each other. Join us weekly to keep up to date on our next guest and our progress, the movement for gender parity in business, and the latest issues by following us at WB Collaborative on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you and have a great Thursday.
Thank you.